I like is AI will not replace you, but somebody who uses AI better than you might. I think one very important skill that we see is learning how to delegate and work asynchronously.
今、世界が注目するスコット・ウー氏。彼が生み出したのは、設計からリリースまで自ら行う完全自律型 AI エージェント Devin。アメリカのウォール・ストリート・ジャーナルが特集し、ゴールドマン・サックスは導入テストを開始。パープレキシティ AI の CEO も人間の限界を超える初のエージェントと称賛。創業半年で企業価値20億ドル、現在では100億ドル、約 1.5 兆円規模の評価額になるまでに急成長。AI と人間の未来に対し、スコット・ウー氏に単独インタビュー。
So today, what we see with Devin is that in the right use cases, when companies use Devin for particular projects, they go something between 8 to 15 times faster often. And so what that means is every hour of an engineering's time using Devin corresponds to 8 to 15 hours not using Devin for that use case. But of course, the use cases that you see that on are very particular. And I think over time, what we want to do is we want to get to that kind of productivity increase across the board, where every engineer can produce 10 times more code. I think that it will take us some time, obviously, to get to that level. But we're very excited about a world where everyone can write 10 times more software. Yeah, I think similar to the last point, which is I think engineers will get to spend much more of their time on high-level decisions, including architecture, including defining each of the details of their solution. I think the most important skill in engineering is to understand what is the problem exactly, what is the solution to the problem, how should we implement the solution. And I think that this core problem-solving ability will become a bigger and bigger part of how engineers spend their time. The engineer will solve the problem themselves, and then once they have a clear picture of what their solution is, they will be able to implement it much faster now. We would love to build software, and I think that the biggest long-term effect is that we will build much more software. And like we said, it's in the year 2000, there were less than 1 million engineers, and now there are over 30 million engineers. And I think soon, much more people will be able to write and build software. I think the skills of what it takes to be a good software engineer will be different. And one of the biggest differences is that being able to use AI very well will be very important. And one of my favorite quotes that I like is AI will not replace you, but somebody who uses AI better than you might. Yeah, so I think for problem solving, problem solving already is a big part of software engineering. And I just think that over time, people will get to focus on it more and more and more. I think that really deeply, one example I give is people always ask me, my son or daughter is 16 years old, should they even study computer science? And I always say, yes, they should study computer science. And the reason is because the fundamentals of understanding the computer model, understanding the architecture, understanding how to use logic to break down problems, those are, I think, the most important skills, actually, not syntax in some programming language, right? I think that practicing that problem-solving ability and understanding the fundamentals better and better will only be more valuable over time. I would say it's already, extremely valuable to understand the fundamentals well, but I think it will become more so. I think one very important skill that we see is learning how to delegate and work asynchronously. And I think for individual engineers, they are often very used to working one step at a time, right? First thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, and very linearly, right? And I think that when everyone has their own team of AI software engineers, now all of a sudden you have to think about how do I break down the problem so that we can make progress on 3 different things at once or 5 different things at once. And I think that's a very important fundamental skill. And I think funnily enough, I think people today who have that skill most actually are managers. And the reason is because, of course, they have the same effect. But I think to some degree, we are all learning how to manage our own team of AI agents. And you don't have to deal with human emotions for the management, but of course you still want to be able to understand how to break down your tasks and how to work effectively with the team. But of course I would say that in many ways the most important thing is to just keep up with the technology and continue to be at the frontier and learn how to use it. It's a very special time because the capabilities change dramatically every few months. And so it's very important to stay as up to date as possible with the most powerful technology. I think about all of the software products that I use every day. I use a lot of products. And I try to keep track of every time something happens that I feel like the software could be better. And as you can imagine, it happens 1,000 times a day. And I think the main thing that I think about every time is we really can make all software much, much better. Yes. I think I would say in the past, it was the case that as a junior engineer, for example, right after school, your first few jobs, your first few years, you don't really get to do any deep creative or architectural work, right? You just are handed projects and you just implement them and then that's it. And after you do that for a few years, then you can finally graduate and you learn how to make higher level decisions. And I think a big shift that we're seeing is we want our engineers to be learning and thinking about those even sooner, right? Because now it is Devin that actually does a lot of the raw implementation because, so now that we don't have to anymore, right? And so I think in that way, almost it's like all of our engineers are one level up, basically, right? Because there's usually the very bottom level of just implementation, and then there's a level above, and then a level above, and a level above. But now Devin does the bottom level of implementation. And so our most junior engineers are still the level above that. And then the engineers above them are already on the 3rd level, and so on.
AI がソフトウェア開発を完全に代替することは
I think no, and I think the reason is because our computers and through AI are becoming more and more and more powerful over time. But it is always going to be up to us to decide what to build. And deciding what to build, of course, is a skill that requires you to really understand all of the details of the decisions that you're making and what you're building. And that's what software engineering is. It really is, deciding what to build, right? And I think that one thing I would say is, it was only 70 or 80 years ago that when we said programming or software engineering, we were talking about the punch cards, right? And after that, people were talking about assembly, and that was programming, right? And then people were talking about C or Java or Python. And we have always changed what it means, what you're actually doing when you're programming. But the most important part that has always stayed is really understanding what it is you want your computer to do and being able to explain that to your computer.
ビジネスプラス IT ムークをご視聴いただき誠にありがとうございました。本動画の前編はメンバーシップかビジネスプラス IT の動画チャンネルでご視聴いただけます。ぜひご覧ください。